Happy Juneteenth, 20th day, right?
20th.
That's the one downside with the 19th being a holiday, is that now we're not, from an organizational standpoint, we don't know whether we're going to hold on the 19th or the 20th, right? Because it's a holiday, right? So I think 20th is probably the way to go. So
Yeah.
Good to see Karen. All right, I want to begin. So hello, good morning, good afternoon, depending where you are in the world. Thank you for joining us. My name is Anthony Chow. I'm the director of the School of Information at San Jose State University. It is our great honor and privilege to be able to host our second annual Juneteenth Day celebration. And I just wanted to read a quick preamble before we hand it over to Benny and team. So many of you are aware, the history of Juneteenth Day is that although the Emancipation Proclamation by President Abraham Lincoln was formalized January 1st, 1863, there was a combination of lack of communication and also systematic ignoring of that Emancipation Proclamation in Texas in particular. And so the General Order number 3 from Galveston, Texas, was formally resolved June 19th, 1865. And I just wanted to read a couple of sentences from that General Order. The people of Texas are now informed that in accordance with the proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. So for me, learning about Juneteenth Day was a very important part of my own education as we continue to embrace equity, diversity, inclusion in our society. So although it's considered the longest running holiday in African American and Black communities, it was often observed with community celebrations on the third Saturday in June, but largely, I think, quiet within the Black community. Juneteenth Day became a federal holiday in 2021 after the U.S. Congress passed the Juneteenth National Independence Day Act, the latest and most recent national holiday. So it's a formal recognition and celebration of a seminal point in Black history. And again, we're honored to be joined by Benny Tate Wilkin, library services consultant and professional storyteller and fellow troublemaker with me, and Vogue Robinson, poet laureate of Clark County, Nevada from 2017-2019. I'm going to turn it over to you, Benny. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Chow. Juneteenth celebrates freedom. Juneteenth, it's a national holiday. I want to thank everyone for joining us today in this celebration of freedom. The establishment of Juneteenth as a national holiday has spawned a lot of interest, but for a long time, many years, people in the African American community celebrated Juneteenth as a day of remembrance. It was really a day to continue the march toward becoming full-fledged free citizens of the United States of America. So the piece that I'm going to share with you sort of takes us on the ride, which has been very difficult for African Americans since that day when they learned that they were free. And we're continuing on this difficult ride. And Juneteenth reminds us that freedom is not easy, and it's a continuing process. My piece is called Lamentations and Exhortations. Torturous chains at dark skins tore. Human cargo by thousands lay in store. Stowage packed, sickened by stench and stale air, goaded by stick and whip, on deck for repair. Weakened bodies pulled from fetid space, told to exercise, shuffle, dance, or pace. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child, a long way from home, a long way from home. Nobody knows the trouble I see. Nobody knows my sorrow. Thundering drums of Africa cried out where they stood, pounding, stomping feet on planks of wood. Ships, forever stained by blood and grief, bound captives jumped for final relief. Igbo Landing marks the deep where some chose to die. Enslavement rejected, drowning, the only way to fly. Now give me 2 wings to veil my face. Give me 2 wings to hide my feet. Give me 2 wings so I can fly where the world can't do me no harm. Hands raw, bodies weary, forced to work the land, families torn apart, sold as property in hand. Determined to survive in hope for a better day, helped by kin already free, few stole away. And persons of conscience formed an underground rail for captives, rivers, and stars, the runaway trail. Deep river, my home is over Jordan. Deep river, I want to cross over into campground. When the sun goes down in the western sky, watch that star and see I run. Barns and attics, active railroad stations, hundreds vanished from plantations. Captors showed no remorse. Dogs and hunters sought their prey. Returned of, quote, property, signs placed on display. The hunted were undaunted. Freedom was the goal. Conductors ticketed many trips, and death took its toll. Get on board, little children. There's room for many more. This train is bound for glory. This train, carrying only the righteous and the holy. This train. After years of toil and warfare, chattel were released. No money, no land. Plight of poverty increased. Partially untethered, some traveled north to be free. In sway stood inner strength and resiliency. The chains were cut. Sharecropping substituted slavery. White supremacy posed as manifest destiny. I've been viewed and I've been scorned. I've been talked about, sure as you're born. Didn't my Lord deliver Daniel? Daniel, why not every man? Jim Crow laws were declared, separation signed. Former captives never equal, always to walk behind. Perfected the language, saluted the nation's flag, built the South's economy, emancipated, but in rags. Rich planters dispossessed, power prolonged, taunted, chanted, go back where you belong. Just like a tree planted by the water, we shall not be moved. I don't feel no ways tired. I've come too far from where I started from. Producing doctors, scientists, and inventors, Friedman followed every trend allowed to enter, fought foreign wars, revealing hero faces, and upon return, directed back to their places. The scorned survived under no illusion. The Republic of the, quote, free feared African infusion. Went to the rock to hide my face. Rock cried out, no hiding, I place down here. Joshua fit the battle of Jericho. Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down. Confronting destitution, never giving up the fight, people of color sought justice with all their might. They worked, they sang, and never tired. Migrated from the South and still met with ire. Everywhere unwelcome and separated, created Renaissance enclaves and celebrated. Rock of my soul, in the bosom of Abraham, oh, rock of my soul. Oh, what a beautiful city. 12 gates to the city. Hallelujah. Rebel families with small children in tow gathered to watch strange fruit shows, lynchings. Men jeered, humiliated, protesting for rights long awaited. Good people, all cultures and generations joined in resistance, challenging the nation. Oh, oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Before I'd be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave and go home to be free. Laws passed, progress was made. Jim Crow hid, but kept its trade. Raised its head with impunity. Mobs, the Klan, burned homes and communities. Nonviolence met wayward law, officers in legions. Stunned viewers watched in worldwide regions. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round, walking down Freedom Way. Walk together, children. Don't you get weary. There's a great camp meeting on the other side. Mourning descendants of those enslaved yearn for an America dreamed of and craved, where humans, recycled bits of stardust, hold reverence for life. Examples for the world, promoting peace, rejecting strife. Boots off the neck of freedom, breathing authoritatively. Democracy, the legacy, all in one company. There is peace like a river. There is peace like a river. There's peace like a river in my soul. I'm going to lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside and study war no more. That ends Lamentations and Exhortations. And now I'd like you all to join me in a ritual that we celebrated for the last 30 years when we celebrated Juneteenth at the A.C. Bilbrew Library of the Los Angeles County Library System. What we did was to name an African-American person who had a strong influence in our lives. It need not be a celebrity. It need not be an athlete. It can be someone close to you, a mother, a father. When we were alive, we could shake hands. But now on Zoom, if there's somebody near to you, you can shake their hands. But if not, we would like you to place the name of some African-American person, because that's what Juneteenth is all about. It's about the many miles that we've traveled to freedom. And some of those miles included small steps that made a strong impact in our lives. And we'd like you to put those names now in the chat. We're going to take about 3 to 5 minutes for you to do that.
Miss Benny, can I read them out loud?
You can read some of the names, yes.
Yeah. My grandmother, Martina Carpenter, Roz Gazer. We had Ida McGee, Kathleen Glasgow, John Kenny, Tony Pounds, Bell Hooks, Laverne Cooper Hopkins, Yasmin Schuler. Hope I'm saying it right. Schuer. Ms. Wilson, my 4th grade teacher. Charles Reeder, Myrna B, Hetty Swoops, Mary Morgan, Diana Winslow, Samuel Delaney, and Octavia Butler, Bernadine Sullivan, Brother Cornell West, Betty Tate Wilkin, Nelson and Betsy Stevens, Stevens Crossroads, South Carolina, Patricia Hill Collins, Benny Tate Wilkins, E.J. Josie, Sylvia Winter, Daniel Artis, Toni Morrison, Audre Lorde, Maya Angelou, Nikki Giovanni. This is like my lineup right here. my friend Marcy. Shout out to my friend Marcy. Benny Tate Wilkin, Clint Smith, Michelle Obama, my father, Joseph Fontenot, Anthony Battle, my role model in high school, Tallahassee, Florida. Come on. The Honorable Thurgood Marshall. Say the whole name. My beautiful mom, Carmen, Beverly Jenkins, Vincent Harding, Huey P. Newton, James Baldwin, Marcy Pride, first Black female dean of library. Come on, at Liberty University. Give me some facts. James Baldwin. I feel like that we're missing Marsha then. Marsha P. Walsh then. Marsha.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for doing that. And I'm sure that Alfredo will save the chat. There's Alonzo Davis there, Marsh P. Johnson, and hopefully we can save these names. And if anyone would send a request, we can probably provide the list of names for you. But now we want to get on to the best part of today's presentation, and that's Vogue M. Robinson. I met Vogue when she was doing a poetry reading at the local Black gallery. Yes, in Vegas, we do have an African-American gallery. And when you come back to Vegas the next time, make sure you visit it. It's called the Left of Center Gallery. It's outstanding. I heard this young woman read and I said, oh my goodness, she is so powerful and so talented. And later, Vogue was selected as the second poet laureate for Clark County, Nevada. And I would like you to hear a couple of her offerings, whatever she wants to share with us today. And she's also going to mention to us how important libraries are to creative people like herself. I introduce you to Vogue M. Robinson.
Why, thank you. Look, I gotta take you everywhere. We gotta go on the road, Miss Benny. Thank you. And thank you for inviting me. Thank you to all of you for being here this morning. If it's morning where you're at, it's morning where I'm at. So before I share, I'd love to hear a little bit from y'all. And by here, I mean, type it in the box. So if y'all, I'm going to give you a prompt and I want y'all to think about freedom. So if you want to take a moment, if you want to close your eyes, that's cool. And take a good inhale. Ooh, and that exhale whenever you need to. Think about freedom and what does freedom mean to you? What does it look like? What does it smell like? What does it sound like? What does it taste like? And we're going to put into the chat right now a prompt for y'all because I can't go nowhere without making people do an activity. Forgive me or not. So if y'all would pick one of those prompts, looks, smells, sounds, tastes, or feels, and go ahead and fill in the blank for me. You can take that first section, freedom looks like, and add your section, add your answer. So I'm gonna give y'all a minute or two to give us some fill in the blanks for when you think about freedom. Freedom looks like what? Freedom smells like what? Freedom feels like safety in all my comings and goings. Come on, Karen Swoops. Freedom feels like a lack of fear. Come on, Chelsea. Tina says, freedom is loving my Blackness, being liberated from seeing myself through the eyes of society's narratives about Black people. Viola says, freedom feels like being able to rest. Ray Turner says, freedom feels like choice. Come on. That's how I feel. Yes. Freedom smells like rain, comforted in resting, in feeding growth. That's my friend. Susan says, freedom sounds like joyful music. Samuel says, freedom feels like joy. Laura says, freedom smells like fresh air. Brooke says, freedom feels like breath. Mickey says, freedom feels like the sun on my face. Look, I'm not finna read a poem. I'm done here. Y'all are good. Freedom feels like equal access to whatever you want to be and do. Freedom looks like family walking in joy. Freedom feels like being one's authentic self. Yeah. Hopefully we get to save this too, because this is very much y'all's poem today. Excellent. Monica says, freedom feels like honest, deep breaths. Okay. So I'm going to share my work with y'all. Thank you for sharing a bit of your hearts with me. Okay. Woo. So this first poem, I wrote it in 2021. So it's just called Juneteenth 2021, because sometimes I'm simple. And it begins with an epigraph, which is like a little bite of a friend's, my friend's poem. So this is the epigraph. Black people once free did not gather in mobs and hunt, despite all the same access to trees and rope. And that is from Susie Q. Smith, her poem, Black Rage in 4-part harmony. Time does not move for us the way it does for others. Time cannot heal an untended wound. Time will not bring our language back. Call me Black, call me free, call me alive, call me blessed, call me in the middle, call me sister, cousin, wife, TT, homie, lover, friend, call me for my freedom. On time, I will answer that call. How do I rename myself free? It starts with a walk down a well-manicured street. Hold my hand, whistle with me, allegedly, into the wind, careless on a clear blue day. I want to live, to listen and be listened to pray to any and every God, to feel safe in my place of worship, to drop my wallet and pick it up in front of the cops and live to tell the story to grandchildren. A proclamation is not the same as a promise, does not hold a feather to Jim Crow's heavyweight laws, does not blind a neighborhood watch. God, please, make my dreams unhindered, my back unburdened, my peace unbothered, my properties unencumbered. I want to be more lightweight than a body. I want no blood on the leaves, no body undead, spectacle on roadside. May we all live unshackled, amended, rooting for truth on family trees. Stolen. Stolen is such a wide word, wider than the Atlantic. Juneteenth, you were a watermelon seed, a symbol of freedom, a morsel of hope, A half full promise poured over our labor-cracked hands, ached and bare. Time is a sea we have learned to set. Forward and back like clocks, our hands were empty, but they are skilled and full of possibilities. That's that poem. And I'm going to read my second piece. This one is also I took inspiration from Tupac Shakur because he has a book called The Rose That Grew from Concrete. And one of my teachers handed it to me and I was like, what? Tupac got a whole book? And this was middle school maybe. And so I'm gonna read you his piece and my kind of response. Did you hear about the rose that grew from a crack in the concrete? Proving nature's laws wrong, it learned to walk without having feet. Funny it seems, but by keeping its dreams, it learned to breathe fresh air. Long live the rose that grew from concrete when no one else even cared. My response, you know how concrete is formed? Dry to liquid to solid, it pours itself to fill any space. But just before it sets, there is a moment. A magic moment for handprints, names, and shapes. It welcomes collaboration. Did you hear about the concrete who grew roses? Defying the original plan, it softened, cracked, and made room to breathe. Funny it seems, but by daring to dream, it gave life to a flourishing garden. Long live the concrete who grew roses and created its own purpose as a loving frame, creating pathways for flowers to grow. And I got to write that poem for parents and students and educators and administrators of a program out here in Vegas called Abriendo Caminos, also opening pathways. And they were working to find out, why don't we have more teachers of color? And are they missing mentorship? Is it elements of higher education that maybe their families aren't able to navigate? So they work with the students from high school through to their second year of being a teacher. So all of that built-in framework support, and they're doing the research as well to back it up. And it was a dope program. And my last piece I'll share with you is short. It's for me, it's for you, it's for us. So here we go. For the ones who have forgotten their brilliance, find some trees, walk through an apple orchard, breathe. Remember, your exhale gives them life. Walk outside on a cloudless day and feel how the warmth presses into your skin without invitation, without filter. You absorb the sun's radiance. Call that ex-lover. You know the one who leans towards you like houseplants lean towards sunlight. There is a longing, a love, a need for all of you, which cannot be bottled or bought. It can't be got from anybody but you. Take up space, stretch your limbs in an empty room, sprawl out about the floor if you can, sing to the dirt of yesterday as it rinses off your body in the shower, sloshes down the drain. You can imagine yourself anew, aligned, aloft. Thank you. And I want to share a little bit about my experiences in libraries. I am a book child. My sister is 6 years older than me. She didn't kick it with me. I kicked it with books until we got older. So I spent a lot of time in libraries, and my grandma made sure we had a lot of books in our home. That was something that I knew was a privilege, to have a home library. And I still was out trying to get some more. And I couldn't necessarily find books by Black authors unless it was in the urban books section. So I didn't find Black poets until somebody handed them to me. A high school teacher handed me Nikki Giovanni, and he's actually a very conservative person, but he knew the importance of emotional connection and how it can change somebody's perspective and turn them into a reader. But the other side of that is going into libraries, going into old school Barnes and Noble and Borders and whatever the other book, there was like three. There used to be 3 major bookstores. But if I wanted a science book written by a Black writer, it's probably going to be beside Zane and Omar Tyree and Terry McMillan, who are great writers, but really too much for middle school Vogue. Middle school Vogue didn't need to have those books, but I read them because it was Black folks on the cover, and wherever I could get it. So as future librarians and those of you who are librarians and working in these spaces, educators as well, history and historical exclusion calls for specific celebrations. It's why we have Juneteenth. It's why we have February's Black History Month. Right now, we're in Pride Month. And they're necessary. We had to create things of our own and also celebrate the people who have been historically suppressed. We have Black-owned bookstores. We have HBCUs. And I think those spaces are all still very important. But the next wave, what needs to also come is inclusivity. And so I want y'all to think about inclusion when you're thinking about creating these displays, when you're giving presentations, is that question of asking yourself, who's represented in my presentation of history? Who is missing? Why are they missing? And who can I add? And just to think about, how it would feel if you never saw books written by people of color, people who look like you, except for in their designated celebratory month, their designated corner of space. And does that make us feel less than or other when we're only showing up in these corners? So I look forward to hearing and seeing more of the beautiful work that y'all do. And thank you for letting me share.
Thank you so much, Vogue. That was wonderful. We're going to end the presentations part of this program with a story. I am told that one of the ways that African-American captives survived, like all of us do, is to find moments of joy, to find those moments when they could laugh. They told stories. They also invented their supermen, their heroes. And High John the Conqueror was one of those. High John had many, many stories. He had special talents and he could almost perform magic. He would appear at one plantation and then he'd appear at another. He seemed to be almost invisible, but yet alive. And in this particular story, High John the Conqueror had landed at a plantation where he was the main cook in the big house. And the owner of the house loved pork. He had lots of pigs and he had pork. Just about every meal. And he loved the way that John fixed it for him. Well, John fixed that pork, but he never got to take any back home. Not even the skin to make cracklings out of. The owner didn't let him take anything. Well, John just got tired of this. And he says, I deserve better than this. I'm just going to steal me one of those pigs. And he did. He stole a pig, took it down to the slave quarters, cooked it in a great big pot, and it was delicious. And he shared it with everybody in the slave quarters. Well, he waited a while and then he stole another. But it wasn't long before the owner realized that his pigs would disappear. So he was very watchful. He didn't catch anybody at first, but one evening he was sitting out there with his gun and saw High John taking away a pig. And he couldn't believe it. His favorite cook. What was he going to do? Well, he went back up to the big house and he waited a while. Then he went over to John's cabin, knocked on the door. John opened up the door a crack and said, "Who is it? What you want?" "It's me, John. Let me in." John let him in. "What you doing? What is it? What you want? Owner sat down on the edge of John's one little cot that he slept on and said, "What you cooking, John? I see you got something over there in the pot." John said, "Oh, on the way home tonight, I found these 2 old sickly possums, but I figured I could make them taste good. So I took them and I brought them here and I fixed them up and I put them in the pot and I cooked them." Awesome, man. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, ain't the best, but after all, gotta eat. John, I think I wanna taste some of that possum you got in the pot. Taste it? Why you want to taste it? You got plenty of food. What? Taste it? Yes, I want to taste it. But well, I don't ain't got nothing but a broken plate. I don't have anything to serve you anything in. And yeah, but John, I still want to taste it. John found an old broken plate, got himself a spoon, went over to the pot, and he stood there. And then he turned around, looked at the owner and said, "Now you know how good I can cook. When I put these possums in this pot, I work my magic. Now, when I give you a taste, I can't help if it tastes like pig." Well, they tell me the owner laughed so hard, best laugh he'd ever had. He didn't do anything. He just left, went back up to the big house. They say after that, he made sure that High John got a little bit of pig every time he cooked. And of course, High John shared it with everyone he could. That's called High John and the Stolen Pig. Now, we're going to have our student response panel. Dr. Chow, will you introduce our response panel? Is Dr. Chow still here?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Let me
Okay.
get I'm dealing with 2 screens here, so 1 second.
Okay.
Great. Thank you very much. Yes, let me introduce our 2 students. Our students and our alums are really one of the reasons why we want to hold these symposiums, review all of the wonderful things that was just shared as a big part of our education. And I'll share at the end of today the proud fact that we are the most diverse LIS program in the nation. And so in many ways, we have an obligation to learn more about one another and to educate one another about areas potentially that we may not be aware of, and of course, to provide support accordingly. And so we're really happy that Amani and Tina have joined us. Certainly, this is the first time actually we have kind of formally brought students into the conversation, and is definitely something that I think we're going to want to do more of. I believe, and Amani, Tina, forgive me if we've met somewhere before, but I think this may be the first time we have met visually anyway. And so welcome. And again, thank you so much for being part of today's celebration. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Where to begin? Thank you for the beautiful poetry and stories. That was super fun. I really enjoyed that. I do want to talk a bit about Vogue's point about representation. I think that's really really important. And then it's something I've found lacking in my life up until about now when I have chosen to seek it out. So I'm from Southern California. I grew up around LA, San Bernardino County. Growing up, I had one Black teacher, who was a long-term sub for one of my other teachers who had just had a child. So I wasn't getting that close representation at school. When I went to and because there weren't very many Black folks involved in my school, sometimes I feel like, we just got left out. And I think, Vogue, you mentioned that, right? Like there wasn't that representation in the library. In the, the curriculum, we were told explicitly what was in the books, but it wasn't expounded upon because maybe the people who were my teachers, they didn't have that background knowledge to add extra information that the curriculum didn't already contain. And I have a confession. I learned about Juneteenth about 2 years ago. So anyone out there who's new to Juneteenth, you're in good company. I didn't grow up with Juneteenth. I had never heard of it. I was not taught in school. I'm Black, but my parents didn't mention it.
I think it's Californian.
Yeah, it's not part of our family
really
tradition.
common.
Yeah, to celebrate Juneteenth. And so I missed it. And so I've had all these feelings lately about, being in library school and being a representative of the Black community in libraries and in my library school and still having so much to learn. It's challenging. It's really challenging, but events like this help open up the conversation. I've learned a lot today, and I'm hoping that the rest of you can maybe take some inspiration from me and just be open and be okay with saying, I don't know, but I want to learn more. I think the openness is key here with DEI work. Got to be open.
And Tina, you were going to say something?
Yeah, no, I was actually going to say, so I am in Santa Clara County here in California. So about 15 minutes away actually from San Jose State, from the campus. And I had heard about Juneteenth since I was a little girl. And the Black community isn't very large in Santa Clara County. I think we're 2% of the entire county. However, we've always had celebrations for Juneteenth. And I agree with Imani. My experience in schools was very similar. I did not have a Black instructor until I went to college. I had one instructor, Dr. Ebb Hunter at De Anza College, and he was my African American history instructor. And that was probably that was it. And as far as visibility, there was none. And I always say that is just as hurtful and impactful as, in my opinion, as negative stereotypes. That representation, having no representation is just as harmful and hurtful. So I sought it out just on my own. I'm a lover of books. I'm a lover of random facts. That's why I gravitated toward librarianship. And so I was taking myself into the public library from a young age, looking at encyclopedias, going to Barnes and Noble, going to the African American history section, just seeking that knowledge. And so I'm very passionate about it. And I approach librarianship from the perspective of being that child seeking knowledge, that child not always feeling welcome in spaces. That's the way that I approach it. I have a interest in youth librarianship, especially. So I'm always thinking of, when I'm looking at marginalized people, I put myself in that position and go, okay, how did I feel as that child, not feeling that I had a voice, not having anybody, say you matter, or your people have done such great things, not only that we were enslaved, although I am very proud of that, where we've come from and where my ancestors come from, but we are so much more. And especially here in America, we had to invent this culture that we have. And Black culture is American culture. Black music is American music. And I mean, it's literally impacted the world. So that makes me very proud.
And I think it's important for us to, Miss Benny, you are muted. So unmute. and take over.
Oh, I wanted to thank the student panelists for giving us those insights. And I wanted to comment as one of those who has taught in library schools around the country. It's interesting that when you represent you're the only person on faculty from a marginalized community, that everyone from every marginalized community gravitates toward you. So it was not just the African American students who crowded into my offices after classes. It was Chinese. It was Mexican. All came into my office because they knew that they could relate on the in terms of being marginalized, being left out, as you both have commented. And I was glad to hear you say that. It's nothing like feeling like you're left out of the conversation. And that provides the plea that many of us who have had access to teaching and to education have made in terms of library school education. And someone said it, I think it was Imani and probably repeated by Tina, inclusion is so important. And there is not one single element of history, listen to me, there's not one single element of history that does not include African Americans and other marginalized communities. And there is absolutely no excuse for that part of the history being left out of the library school education. I just wanted to make that comment because I've been pleading that case for the last 30, 40 years. And thank you so much, students. You're beautiful. And you're going to be a wonderful asset to librarianship. Now the question and answer session, Dr. Chow, how shall we handle this? Shall we let people put questions in the chat? Do you want to start with some of the questions that we thought about earlier?
I think we can do a combination, but before we do, I just want to again compliment Imani and Tina. I think an important part of what you shared is why libraries are so important for everyone. So when you think about your own experience, think about not being Black, not seeing any history about Black Americans. And then on top of that, being inundated like we all are with the stereotypes that are written by people that are not of that race, right? And so that's why libraries are so critical, because as I get older, I realize that underrepresented often it means statistically we are not as many, right? And so that's important because I really do believe we are so much more alike than we are different. And I think it's those stereotypes that doesn't tell the stories of those teachers that are Black, the dentist that is Black, the doctor that is Black, the lawyer, all those things. You can add Asian and you can add Mexican, Hispanic. And I think that's why libraries are so important, that libraries must be that equalizer that just shares stories. And I think, as Tina, you said, we're all American here. And our experiences are pretty similar. Yes, racism is a big part of that. I think largely because there is that gap in those stereotypes that just drive these divides that really are completely false, false. And I think I just wanted to share that. So I'm proud of you. I'm glad that you joined the iSchool. I'm glad to hear, this has been very, very valuable to you. And again, this is part of education, part of library information science is to educate others with information and knowledge that otherwise they're not going to see on TV. They're not going to see in movies, but it's keeping it real, right? So anyway, just wanted to share that. I just wanted to applaud you again, both for being part of this. Vogue, I know you had unmuted. Did you have any final thoughts before we jump in the Q&A?
just to say, the work of librarians is crucial and key right now while they're consistently revising history books where, our students in different states, the further that away we go on the map, they keep revising history and changing, essentially y'all are homes for truth. And so there needs to be places where people can get the full story and ask those questions of, well, what was happening to Korean people at this time? What was happening to, I think I remember learning about like Japanese internment camps and being like, oh, like this is like a little corner of the war information that nobody gave me. And it stressed me out. It was like, wow. So I feel like America tries to kind of hide elements of its history that aren't so beautiful. It wants to airbrush it. And so I think, yeah, it's you guys' job to, exfoliate America's face and give it the truth. So thank you for this good work, y'all.
That's fantastic. So Benny, I think, and this is for everyone. So we do have some prepared questions, and I think Benny, we could start with that. But for everyone in the audience, feel free to ask questions. We really encourage that discussion, and yeah. So I guess Benny, why don't we start with some of the prepared questions, and certainly Tina and Amani.
I was just hunting. I had my copy of the questions that we had, and it's disappeared in the maze of stuff here on my desk. Do you happen to have that copy out?
They're in my maze too, but I'll find them. But we'll start with well, looks like we do have a
But
question.
maybe we have a question from the audience in the chat. Please put your questions in the chat. We would much rather respond to your questions. These questions can be in regard to the presentation or in regard to the role of libraries in this whole subject of the march toward freedom in America. And that's what it's all about. That's the umbrella subject, the march toward freedom. And
then the question we have from Erica Abad is, in this age of increased censorship, what are ways library patrons can support you in resisting? And she also provided a link to freedomtolearn.net. So boom, we already got resources. But yeah, so Ms. Benny, do you want to take that question? Of how people, considering the amount of censorship that is increasing, how can library patrons actually support the libraries, especially in particular to resistance?
Library patrons can actually be of great help because the thing that is different about censorship, it's been around, and I'm old, so I feel like I've been around libraries 100 years, and censorship is not new. There's a long list of materials that have been the target of repression over the years. But the new thing that is happening currently is that people are trying to write their repressive ideas into law. And what citizens can do for us is to be watchful on the local level of these laws that are being enacted into actual threatening edicts, threats of people's jobs, threats, to have them fired, threats to actually close the libraries and not have any public libraries. And it is the public only that can change that phenomenon. So it is essential that the public get involved in this whole phenomena that has grown so big currently around the nation. Did anyone else want to respond to that? Anyone else on the panel want to respond? Just raise your hand, finger. Okay, unmute yourself, Vogue, and respond.
Yeah, and I think that Well, so out here in Vegas, we have what's called the Solidarity Fridge. So a woman asked her community and then put a fridge in front of her home, and her community added food to it. And also, like, they were free to come and get whatever they need. So that's grown into a whole garden. And so that's a community garden where folks can come in, pick their fruits, chop it up, have a good time. They run events as well. They've done like open mics and like older adult, like all ages, all bodies yoga in the backyard. And of course, the last little thing they needed was the free little library. And so sometimes it's just about who can you impact closest to you as well. And so if you've got some books where you're like, whatever is the book that you keep giving away, that's probably the one that goes in your free little library. So what are your top 5, top 10 books that really helped you and help you gain your own understanding of the world and how it works? And put the free little library out front, or buy a bunch of books. There's another movement, We Need Diverse Books, and it's all a bunch of these beautiful children's books that are just, there's like Julian is a Mermaid. My friend Daria, she has the one called This Is It, and it's a little black ballerina in Brooklyn, or somewhere in New York. Let me not lie to you, like I know places in New York. But it's so many beautiful books that are vibrant and show a better representation of what our country looks like. So make you a little cute little free library, because there's only so much we can do with these major systems. So definitely do your voting, like Miss Benny said, and also know that you can impact your community closest to you.
Dr. Childs wants to speak.
Sure. Before I do, let me open it to Tina and Amani. So I definitely got some thoughts, but what do you guys think?
One thing that I'm really big on too is, and maybe this could be more for the librarian, I don't know, but be familiar with the policies about what happens if someone wants to challenge a book. Also, and look at your collection, the collection development policies within your public library as well. I've just talked to colleagues in public libraries just around the United States, like on virtual groups, and it seems that when people are familiar with the policies that they have around book challenges, what the patron can do, they feel better equipped. They feel better equipped when someone comes in and says, like, I don't like this book, or I don't like this passage. You can give them the policy and say, okay, right, this is what to do. Read the entire book. Come with this and that. And I feel like when you know your policies, you're more empowered.
Mm-hmm.
Amani?
Yeah, I think a lot of what I was going to say has already been said here. I guess I wanted to add too, it's people typically in the community who are calling for books to be taken out of the collection for the censorship. So, and look at all the power that they've had in the past few years. I mean, they're doing so much to harm the diversity of libraries' collections. And so on the flip side, if you feel differently and you want to promote DEI in your local library, find out ways that you can do that. If you need to go to the board meetings, speak with the head people in charge of your library system. That's what those other groups are doing to potentially get books banned. You have access to those options too, as a person who would like to move in a different direction. So yeah, definitely voting, paying attention to your local politics, but also getting involved if you can, because that's what other folks have been doing and it's been working. So if you can, find other people in your community to form a group that can counter other folks' arguments, then that might be something that could work too.
That's great, Amani. And I wanted to echo that. I think that so was the faculty senate chair at UNC Greensboro. So George Floyd and his family is from North Carolina, and so during, after the trial, and of course a lot of unrest, one of the questions that we're all asked is, well, what can we do? And one of the things that became evident to all of us is that silence is unintentional support for the status quo. And I think what Amani said is 100% correct. 2 quick thoughts. One, the research, both brain and educational, basically supports the diversity of perspective and thought, in the fact that not one way is going to work for everybody, right? And so I think that ultimately the book bans are, of course, uninformed would be a gentle way to say that, but most importantly, trying to push on to other people what somebody thinks you should think or live by. And the other is one of science. So case in point, the GPS technology. So I have a drone that I've been having a lot of fun with, a professional grade drone. It connects to 22 satellites at the exact same time to pinpoint where you are in the world. If that's not the perfect example of why diversity is so important, right? In order to understand who you are, you must embrace and bring in information and data from all other different sources, right? And so, and the last thing there, sorry to bore us with science completely, but the very definition of validity also is basically 100% inclusion of information, right? And so that's why openness and equity, diversity, inclusion is so critical. The more voices, the more perspectives we all gather, the more valid our view of the world and ourselves are. And so again, privilege to be in this field, to fight the good fight. So yes, Tina, go ahead.
Yeah, and I just also wanted to add, kind of echoing what Imani said about organizing. I think that that is crucial, and also building up partnerships with like-minded organizations within your community, because it starts with one, the oppression of voices, and then it just spreads from there, and then they will go after something else. So it's very important to build those alliances, as well as reach the youth. There's some great programs. I believe at the New York Public Library, they actually have a group of young people, and that's what they do. They have social media accounts, because the youth is really savvy with TikTok and Instagram, and they talk about banned books around the country. And when you reach the youth, I feel like that's crucial to do that.
Yes, it's educating the community is essential, because I think a lot of times these incidents happen, and they're like passing news, and people don't realize the depth with which these incidents can affect their free access to information. We do have plenty of time left, so I was going to take time and tell you my funny story. I said the way to stop censorship is to laugh.
There's also a good question.
A lady came into a library when I was a children's librarian, and she slammed this picture book down on the table, and she says, "Take this book out of the library. It's a communist plot." And it was a little picture book called Swimmy. I don't know if any of you have ever seen it, but the story is about a school of red fish, tiny little red fish, who were being eaten by the big fish. And there was one black fish among the little red fish who suggested, well, what we should do is swim in formation. If we swim in formation and you look like a big red fish, then I can be the eye. And when the big fish come, they'll see us, they'll think we are huge. And that's what they did, and how they protected themselves by swimming in formation like they were one big red fish, and the little black fish was the eye. Well, she just said this is a communist plot. Well, I gave her the forms. Tina was talking about the routines that you have to go through. Yes, there was a formal process. You have to fill out a form, and it has to be taken to the board and all of that kind of thing. So I said, would you please fill this out? And in the meantime, while she was filling it out, I thought this was so hilarious. I could not control my laughter, so I kept going. And then eventually I just laughed. I said, oh. And I said, I'm sorry. Go ahead, fill this out. She looked up at me and I was going, and she started laughing. My laughter was contagious. Before you knew it, there were two of us at the desk in hysterics, laughing so loud. She left the library, forgot all about her request to have the book removed. She left the library laughing. So when I spoke at the American Library Association once, I said, that's the way to handle censorship. Laugh.
Through laughter. That could be a meme. That's a perfect meme, Benny.
Okay.
We
do have we have two questions in
two questions. Yeah.
In the area. So the first one I've been answering, just I've been quickly clicking around. But
you have another question handy that.
Yes. So we have one from Karen Swoops. And so Karen says, it's been noted that there are power in numbers, and it seems that the numbers are dwindling somewhat. What do you believe can be done to keep the numbers strong and continue to have the needed power to fight against those who want libraries to disappear? And I can read my answer.
Does anybody?
Well,
oh, Tina, you unmuted. Go ahead. Oh, just kidding. So my answer was, it's always the Margaret Mead quote of never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So that quote always, it always takes a few, because that few, all it takes is, it's just the domino effect, the rippling out. Small moments. I'm sure, for some of y'all, you might have met a librarian who was amazing, and you were like, oh, that's a job I can have, and that's a direction I can go. So knowing that, even encouragement. And so I think that's number one, being you and existing and continuing to do the work, even though it's hard out here. It's rough, but knowing that change has come forward. Y'all being in your program means that change is possible. So there's never, if you're ever wondering, whether or not the work is worth it, then look at where you're at and know that, a certain generation of your ancestors may or may not have been able to do what you are doing right now. And that's, yes, it goes across the board for many reasons. But also, like, if you do book clubs, I think that's really helpful. So again, I love a small group. I'm not really here for, I don't want to be in big old places. I want, 4 to 10 people at all times. That's my favorite, size. But working with the youth, younger generations are full of fire. And I think they need consistent support and mentorship in the same way that program about where all the teachers of color, they put together an entire research project of long-term support. So it's about that. And that, I think that speaks to one of the other questions we have too. But if anybody wants to chime in on this one before we go to the next question.
I think that's true. And I think that one thing that a lot of libraries now have gotten on the bandwagon and realized that they can become community centers. They can invite people in. They can have different kinds of programs and that kind of thing. But what's essential in terms of broadening the support for libraries is actual involvement in the community. And there's a difference between having someone come in and do a one-shot program and being involved. I think Tina was the one that said form coalitions. Those coalitions need to be formed on a constant basis, and particularly with the cultural community who understand the importance of this place where we can explore culture and history freely. So libraries have to come up with a formula by which they can link with the community on a serious basis before there is a crisis. And they can immediately then have these core groups with which they have established a solid foundation that they can call upon when they are targeted rather than waiting until there's a crisis and then going out and saying, oh, community, you don't understand. But they will understand if you have already been involved. Am I making sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I have thoughts, but Tina, Bonnie, do you guys want to have any other thoughts about this question?
Yeah, I think I was heading in the same direction as Benny. My idea was, weave yourself into the community, make yourself, indispensable. I'm coming from more of an academic library standpoint. I work in an academic library currently, and that's where I'm headed, hopefully. And on campuses, it's the same. Every year we're begging for money. Can we please keep our doors open this semester, right? And sometimes it seems like the administrators or the campus community don't understand what we do, what libraries can do for a community. So I think, integrating yourself in, going out before a crisis occurs and say, this is what we have to offer, or we'd like to offer this, but we maybe need some support, we need some funding, or we need participation. Going out and integrating yourself into the community, basically outreach, doing outreach and making sure that people know what you have to offer and that you're an important pillar in the community. If people don't know that and they don't understand that, then they're not going to feel maybe called to support when, the library is in some sort of crisis. I think you have to absolutely, like you said, Benny, lay that foundation ahead of time before things get dicey.
Tina, any thoughts?
Yes, echoing what they've said is like having a constant presence in the community. And, I think of like even having your elevator pitch almost, just, it should come naturally and it should be genuine.
Great. And I'll just really quickly say that really two thoughts. One, any problems that the Black community has is an us problem, not a Black problem, right? I think that, again, the George Floyd murders and many repeated, it's something that my former boss and chancellor said, who's an amazing Black man, is, Anthony, I'm still a Black male when I leave this campus. So he's, the most proud. And that's an us problem. If he has to say that, that's an us problem. So that's the first thing, is I think really looking at working together on these issues is critical. And then the other thing I would say, well, two other things. One, Benny, I think the other, or maybe it was Vogue, I think the other question we might want to ask people is, what does racism look like? And the reason why I say that is because I think part of what we all have to do is commit ourselves to not saying things or doing things behind closed doors or with our friends that are offensive to other people, right? You know what I mean? And it's like we have to catch ourselves to make sure that we're not doing that, because the bottom line is oftentimes, in fact, the research again supports explicit racism doesn't occur that often, but the microaggressions, which goes to the next question that we're going to talk about, is all over the place, right? And the stereotypes, et cetera. And the last thing is, I would say, I'm not sure if the question was related to the field of librarianship. The good news is that the LIS field is growing faster than the average. So that's certainly, there are more librarians, right? More or less professionals. So that's certainly happening. And in terms of maybe the Black community and population, again, I think it's an us problem, right? So regardless of the percentage of race, a lot of people, we do this pretty much monthly. Most panelists often say we look to a time where we don't need to have these as much, right? That this just becomes part of the norm. Normalizing, equity, diversity, and inclusion is I think our goal. So, but with that being said, Vogue, I know you answered that second question, which was really good, and a seminal question that really focuses on when you enter the field as a librarian from an underserved community, in this case, a Black librarian, the oppression, the racism, the microaggressions, the the many episodes during a day and in your career that can kind of lead you to just quit. I think the question is what would be the advice, I think, from Tina and Amani, but I think the whole panel in terms of how does one survive? How does one find more resources to make it bearable? And of course, I've got a lot of thoughts here, but I'm going to go last. So Tina, Amani.
I'll go. Well, for me personally, it's having spaces like affinity groups and organizations like Bacala and the California Black Librarians Caucus. Like all of those spaces are crucial to realizing that there are people like me in this field, because I have to say, as a student that's in a program that's completely online, it's easy to feel like you are the only one. And especially I started during the beginning of the pandemic was when I started in the program. So it felt very isolating at times. So yes, those groups are especially important. And I've also become part of like Reforma and other library groups, because we only have each other. We only have each other just as people of color in this profession.
And one thing I've always said in teaching outreach and connecting with community, and I do want to say it again, is we have to realize that we don't know it all. Educated people have this way of saying, I'm going to reach out to community, but what they do is they go out into community and tell the community everything they know. And this is what I know, and this is what I know, and this is what I know. And the first thing I teach in outreach is you have to learn how, if you're going to work with a different community, to plead ignorance, even in your own communities, because it's like, I think it was Imani who says, I just learned about Juneteenth 2 years ago, so you don't know it all. When you're trying to make a connection with the community, you plead ignorance. You ask for help. And if you ask for help, you will get it. I did outreach for umpteen years in Los Angeles. And my modus operandi was, I'm here because the library I had is trying to improve itself. I need your help. Can you help me? And when you ask sincerely for help, you will get it.
Amani, Vogue.
Yeah. Oh, did you want to go ahead, Vogue? Okay, thanks. I did want to add, somewhere in this program, we get so many links, guys, but someone somewhere in this program introduced me to a site an organization called We Here, and they have a publication called Uproot. Tina's nodding. Yes, I'm going to pop those links in the chat when I'm done talking. But that's a really great resource for connecting librarians of color, specifically to talk about the challenges that we do face in the profession. And one thing I keep seeing there again and again and again is find a mentor. Don't be isolated. Find a community, number one, yes, but find a mentor that you can develop a personal relationship with. So when you're having a really hard day, something comes up for you, you have a support system within the profession that you can lean on, because, you can, of course, speak to your family, speak to your friends, but there's certain specific things that are just LIS related. There's a specific, you want somebody who maybe understands those issues and maybe who's probably honestly been through it. So that's something I see again and again and again. Try to find a mentor who really gets you. And that's kind of a process sometimes, shop around almost, I guess, for lack of a better term. Find somebody you really click with, who's willing to work with you and start to form those personal relationships within the profession, because that's how we keep each other afloat. If you feel isolated, it's hard to stay in the profession.
Yeah. And then, if all else fails, then you got to get out of there because you got to make it. So just because you leave one library doesn't mean you're leaving the entire field. But, Viola shared that this is your first year out of the program. And so, ew. like, ew. It'll sour you, the wrong place will sour you and make you forget why you love what you do, why you love that field. One thing that that Viola noted, Dr. Chow, and I hope you can speak to this, is that there were a couple of classes, some seminars that were helpful of like how to navigate the workplace. But, is there space for in the future to either have a student organization or something, another way for student affairs to really support the students? It's that year after. I think we all need floaties to slide into this career life. So I'm curious, Dr. Chow, what are other things y'all do to prepare your students?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think that we've been having both a national and statewide conversation about underserved student groups that are within the EDU, right? So part of what I was been thinking is that maybe we need to have a Bacala, a version within the iSchool, because I think sometimes when we go to state and national, you get lost a little bit in the shuffle, right? So I think that's one, is to create, and then today is also an example, right? So we just kind of went down the Heritage Months and made sure that we're going to provide a lot of support and bring great people to the table like you all are, as far as talking about issues. But I think the other would be stay in touch with your faculty and your peeps, right? So Viola, make sure that you're in touch with some of your other peers and certainly faculty as well. I think remember, like Benny said, it doesn't necessarily have to be a Black faculty member, right? Other underrepresented, we get it too. As far as we've been on that same bitter pill of being discriminated against, right? So I think find allies, and I think too, life is tough, right? Yeah, you have to learn, find your groove, right? And unfortunately, life teaches a lot of difficult lessons. So the other thing I would say is don't give up, work really hard, show them through your, who you are and who you want to be. And I think, again, by definition, being underrepresented means that we're not the norm, right? And so I think oftentimes, I don't think people are necessarily trying to be racist. It's just that the norms that they're expecting aren't your norms or not my norms, right? And so therefore there becomes dissonance. So I'd say all of those, but support. I think you've heard that from all of us. There's a lot of support out there. Don't feel isolated. I think anyone that's again felt discrimination, we are in solidarity, because it's a horrible feeling, and we certainly don't want it, other people to feel it. So.
And I'll give you an underground clue. You move into some place and you don't have anybody to talk to. There are usually some other positions where you find people of your same culture. Again, you don't be too uppity. Talk to the Black secretary. I mean, this Black secretary saved my life, I'm telling you. I was in one place where she absolutely saved my job, because I had linked up with her when I first came in. And I mean, they don't have to be your cut buddies. You don't have to invite them to dinner. What you do is you establish a relationship with them, saying, I see you, I know you, I hear you, and I'm willing to talk with you. And that's what you do. You don't have, I don't mean you don't have to take them out to dinner or any of those things. You know what I mean?
But they might. It could happen. It ends up happening, I feel like, Miss Benny. Like, that's how Miss Benny found me at Left of Center and was like, hey, she's been trying to track me down for years and been like, let's do something together. And because I was guarded and just wasn't sure, I was like, I don't know why she keeps hitting me up. Like, she's amazing and she's established and she don't need me. And when I finally got out of my head and was like, if this woman keeps greeting you with kindness and care, where are you going? What other direction should you be going besides in her direction where you're supported? I wouldn't have this gig. I wouldn't be here. I'm getting paid. Okay. I would not be here today if not for me saying yes to somebody who extended a hand. And so it's hard. I bet friendship is like dating at this point, y'all. Like, it is difficult, but pay attention to the way people look at you, the way they speak to you. And sometimes it is somebody who looks like you, and sometimes it's somebody who's like, it's your cousin. But give people a chance to show you who they are, and then operate accordingly. And thank you, Miss Benny. You're the best.
Oh, and thank you. You're beautiful. We have just a few more minutes left. Does anybody on the panel have something, some final words they'd like to say? What about you, Tina? Any final words you'd like to say to the community out there?
Well, and I'm sorry to interrupt, Benny, but before we do, there are a few really good questions that we had prepared.
Oh, there is? Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
If you wanted to do that, but Amani, go first, and then feel free to. We'll just go back and forth. How's that, Benny? I've got the questions here in front of me, so.
Okay, if you wanna do at least another couple of questions, that'd be fine with me.
Sure. Well, did Monty want to go? Monty, go and answer her question first, and then I'll
Okay.
jump in.
All right.
I thought you would. Yeah. Go ahead.
Did you mean the if you have any final words?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I was just at CLA, which was super fun. If any of you were there, I really enjoyed that. But I attended the DEI task force meeting. And one thing that kept coming up there again and again and again from each of the small groups that broke out was, we talk about this a lot, but it's really hard for some libraries to translate this into action. So how do we actually promote diversity within our institutions? How do we actually promote equity and inclusion? And so I guess I want to urge people to think it's good to think about it, but at some point it has to move out into the physical space. Talking is the starting point, but we have to take action. I think that's where it seems like a lot of libraries might be getting stuck, because that seemed to be the sentiment. And we talk about it a lot, but then nothing's happening, or all these things that are kind of anti-DEI are happening, but nobody's really noticing what's going on here. So maybe it's a good time to do like a DEI audit and see, what are you actually doing? What concrete steps are you taking to actually promote DEI within your institution? And just maybe make a list and see what you've got going on, or make a list of things you'd really actually like to put into action instead of just talking about it, because the action is actually what's going to get out to your patrons and infiltrate through a filter through the rest of the organization. Just talking about it isn't enough. You have to act. So that was something that came up quite often in that session. I wanted to share that here.
You're here. You're seeing all the head nods, action, and strategy. And also, I think having been involved in a lot of teams and organizations, finding places where there's common ground too also helps, right? So instead of just focusing on the differences, where do we have common ground to then start that conversation, right? So, all right, a couple of questions, and Benny, you can keep me in line here as we're running out of time, but they're all really great questions, and this will be really for the whole panel. So I think the first one, why is a celebration such as this important to those promulgating information? As the future portends, and these are questions that were asked previously for the event. As the future portends robotic applications replacing many of the roles now filled by educators and librarians, does preserving the human story in present tactical formats become even more important? A little bit of a leading question, but what does everybody think? Benny versus AI. We'll take Benny every time. But are these celebrations important? Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, forever and ever, amen. That's the answer to the question. And I think even now, every year, an article comes out. It's like, is poetry still, important or alive? And it's just like, oh, that's a cute question that you wrote so that you could get some clicks. If poetry's name is in your mouth, then clearly it's still relevant. Stay blessed is my general answer to that. So when I think about events like this, I think it's about how an organization decides to go forth in celebration, right? So we've had events, and Vegas has blown up with a lot more Juneteenth events. And I think while in Black communities, I understand a full, we are just celebrating. In mixed company, then there needs to be an educational component. There needs to be a certain elements of accountability, of steps, of calls to action, because there's more to it. And it just depends on your vantage point, where your people were at. So I think, you know, as long as we're, and that people still enjoy each other. And I think we realize that more as a result of pre-vaccination days. It's really, really clear how much we miss each other, how much we need each other. And also that through Zoom, through technology, we're also finding new ways to connect with one another. And so I think, let's not forget, we create technology for our own convenience. And I think the last like FaceTime commercial I saw was like, you know, it was about just people being able to see their grandchildren. So to go from like the old school collect call commercial, like, oh, we had a baby, it's a boy, to now we've got FaceTime. It's all for the sake of connection. So I think we're going to be okay.
You're here. Benny,
Well,
you got
my worry is that other areas of technology, they come in and they take over, and we haven't discussed it, the consequences. And I think that it's time for librarians to look at that and consider the fact that that just as companies usurped all the information from libraries and set up the internet, they went in libraries with their cameras and with their tapes and copied stuff out of libraries. I mean, that's where it came from. I mean, that's where the information came from. And we said, okay, well, this is going to be a helpful tool. And it has been a helpful tool, as long as we keep it a helpful tool and not let it guide us. And the already poets like Vogue are being preempted by AI apps that are already available. All you have to do is say, I want a poem about Juneteenth, and I want it directed to children, and AI will spout you out something. And people are taking that stuff and calling it poetry. And so good people with sensibilities, with experience, with background, and with concern for humanity are going to be pushed to the edges. And that question, of course, was saying, do libraries then have to look back at what their initial role was? And that was keeping the record and keeping it so that people have access to all of history and all of humanity. And will the library be one of those places where we can not just communicate with each other, but touch each other when we communicate, rather than have somebody spouting something off of a machine to us? I think it is a subject that is relevant to libraries, and but it needs a lot of in-depth discussion, and that's why I included it in our list of questions.
Tina?
Tina, you
Yeah,
raised.
I'd also like to add a thought about that, about having control of the narrative. That's why I think archivists are so important, along with librarians. We're related, information fields. And I think that's why it's so important. I think, as we saw in, recent events in the last few years, I mean, archivists saved our government. So that's why it's important to preserve history, and also to encourage diversity within the fields, so we can get different perspectives of the stories and not just through one lens.
Well said, Tina. Amani, Vogue, any thoughts? Well, I just wanted to echo what both Benny and Tina said. I think one of the criticisms of AI is its machine assumptions about information and knowledge. So one would say that AI might say, well, we don't really need celebrations like this because we have some of the greatest minds ever writing about why it's important to emphasize equity, diversity, inclusion. Why, in other words, AI would say, well, it's already been written, so therefore, why do we need to have celebrations? Of course, the human side of things, so we're all busy, and just because it might exist somewhere doesn't mean that we necessarily have read it, right? And in fact, one would say, oftentimes the people that need to read it the most are the people that's going to read it the least, right? And so I think celebrations are important in our busy lives because it, again, Tina and Amanda, you guys probably don't realize it, but just the positive feedback you provided helps me feel good about all the work that we're doing to do these things, right? We don't know, and so it's very, you guys don't know how much you reinforced us from a human level, just hearing that from a couple of our students. It's really important. So we have it transcribed and recorded too. So yeah, and then I think the last thing would be, when we talk about AI, we talk about what AI uses for its resources. We all agree that it's going to systematically push down the important people, right? In other words, AI is going to say, okay, how many times is Benny published, or how many times is Tina published? It's going to use these metrics that are going to downplay the importance of all of our individual experiences. And actually, the last thing I would say is I think libraries are going, Tina, building on your point about archival duties, I really think libraries are headed towards recording the stories of all individuals in their communities. And then, Benny, AI can be a friend, because then AI can go into your story, and your story, Tina, you may not be published, but it will find your story and add that to the body of knowledge, the canon of knowledge. I think that's beautiful. And I think that's where libraries are going, is that we're actually going to be, as AI is taking a little bit more of the academic side, libraries are going to be more on the individual side. Tell us your stories, share your lessons. Those are all important, right? And now we have tools that can now match Vogue's wisdom with somebody else somewhere else on a whole other side of the world, right?
Yeah.
And now we have a canon of knowledge that the people are creating. That's very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so the next.
I want Vogue live. I don't want her as a hologram.
That's right.
That's the difference. I want to be able to see her beautiful face live. I don't want somebody, the AI, posting a hologram of her and making me believe that she's there.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. With that being said, I think AI also will help preserve us, Benny, Vogue.
Yeah.
When we're gone. In other words, at least our great grandkids could say hello to us or have a conversation, right? That's kind of where I think it's going as well. Right now, that could be dangerous, right?
That could be dangerous.
But I do think that's where a little bit of that's going. So, yeah. And last thing I would say about this is, so Benny, this is on recording. Next year, we're going to do this in person, Benny. So I'm personally inviting the campus because my last year at USC Greensboro was the first year we had a Juneteenth celebration, and so I was introduced to the beignet from New Orleans, right? And so I got to have me a beignet, and I got to have a beignet with you, Benny. so next year,
that's
I think
a whole book, beignets with Benny.
Beignets and Benny.
Yeah, there we go. We already got the title, right? So, but I think let's talk about that. But I really think that next year we could have a face-to-face element, and then we can go to Zoom.
Then we can go to Zoom. Yes,
that's right.
Absolutely. That would be wonderful. And thank you so much for inviting me back again this year. And Vogue, I'm so happy you were willing to come and join us. That poetry was really striking that you did this morning for us. And I'm so happy to meet Tina and Imani, and I hope I'm going to see you again sometime in the near future. I am a member of the California Librarians Black Caucus, and so I'm hoping that we'll meet somewhere along the way. And I want to thank our audience. A lot of you hung in there with us right up to the end. And send us your comments. Send the comments to Dr. Chow, and we'll use them for our next session. Dr. Chow, you may have the last word.
Thank you, Benny. Yeah, again, I want to sincerely thank everyone here, Vogue, Amani, Benny, and of course, Tina. So let's give them all a round of applause for their time and their wisdom. So today represents our commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion, and providing opportunities for learning, education, and expanding our understanding of who we are together as Americans. I'm glad you all joined us. I also want to thank our hardworking and dedicated staff, Vivian Zuo, our events coordinator, Alfredo Alcantar, our emerging tech coordinator and Zoom guru, who's with us today, Iori Tokunaga, our EDI student writer, Sonia Velasco, our social media coordinator, and Nicole Perviance, our director of marketing, for their significant role in making today's event a success. Again, this reflects how much hard work goes into ensuring gatherings like today take place. I share this with you to reinforce that equity, diversity, and inclusion, and to create safe spaces for honest and candid conversations and sharing information takes a lot of time, takes a lot of resources, and leveraging whatever privilege and authority you may have to support it. I also want to thank you for joining us. And the good news is that we'll have a full transcript, recording, and a summary of today's event that will be posted in our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion library. And by the way, I'm using EDI specifically because that is how ALA is using it, and that's also how our accreditation standards are going to be measured. I know it's always an argument, but Equity, Diversity, Inclusion is how we're using that. Also, feel free to join our YouTube channel, specifically focused on equity, diversity, inclusion, and that's Alfredo is going to drop that in the chat there. So please subscribe to that. And then finally, please join us for our future symposium. So Pride Month, and our keynote speaker, Deb Sicca, will be Wednesday, July 5th from 10 to noon. We'll also be having a Hispanic Latino symposium. The date has not been set, but that'll be led by Loida Garcia-Febo, former ALA president, and also our Equity, Diversity, Inclusion ambassador, and also Native American Heritage Month. So I'm proud to say that we have close to $1.7 million worth of funding to work with Native and Indigenous communities here at the iSchool. And I'm sure you'll be hearing from some of our partners in those grants as well. So as a final note, in order to support EDI, you must allocate the time and resources to make it happen. I think, as Amani said, we must put action into our words. And so all of you have done that today by either participating or joining us. And again, I look forward to, I'm very optimistic about the future. It's a lot of hard work, but we're up to the challenge. So thanks again for joining us, and have a great day. And Alfredo, why don't you not just leave us on for just a little bit longer so we can kind of debrief or whatever if we need to. So, but anyway, have a great day and take care.